Good morning, Keller Williams Prosperity. It's Matt and Mary Beth here for our daily shift series.
Good morning.
Good morning. Today, hope you had a great weekend. Today, we're going to be picking up with shift tactic 5, lead conversion. So, last week we ended talking about lead generation, and today we're going to talk about lead conversion, which, if you remember, in the first part of the book, Gary Keller said the two most important responsibilities of an agent, whether individual or on a team, is lead generation and lead conversion. So now that we did part 1 of that, we're now going to shift to part 2, which is lead conversion, and mainly talk about capturing, connecting, and closing today. So those are going to be the 3 things that we'll be covering.
Yep.
So the first thing I wanted to highlight, because I always love like the little quotes that they have at the beginning of the chapter, because I think that kind of sets the tone for the whole chapter, is it says, it's a quote from William James, who said, "Most people never run far enough on their first wind to find they've got a second."
That's right.
And I feel like that really sums up a lot of the whole shift mindset, which is just that it reminded me of like when I used to do soccer, and they used to say like the first session in August when I was out of shape would be like run 4 miles. And you'd be running and running and running, and then you realized, okay, you can do it. And you had the cramps, you had the challenges, but then you got that second
Mhm.
wind. And I think to me that converts over to here, where a lot of people, when they're tackling lead generation, it's like, where do I start? I don't want to do it. It's like, okay, let me prepare, but not take action. Um, Yet I think
Mhm.
when you get that second wind, you're gonna then hit it. You're gonna capture and you're gonna close. So I think that ties in nicely with this chapter.
Yeah. And so what some people do though to this point of the conversation is they get to number 9, they don't get to number 10, they don't push themselves to even realize what that potential is. What you were explaining is breaking through that where you think your potential is,
Yep.
reaching it and then realizing you just set the new bar.
Yep.
And then that goes into a lot of mindset, conditioning, practicing over and over again so that you feel that breakthrough.
Hmm.
And we always talk about having a breakdown before we have a breakthrough.
Yep.
And it's the same in lead generation. It's the same in everything in life. The one thing I would say though that Gary said, talking about coming into this chapter, was make sure you know where your leads are coming from. And so we talked about that a bit in the last tactic number 4. But you have to get really, really clear, especially right now, where your leads are coming from. And you should not be depending on one lead source. And for a while, some of us may have been depending on one lead source. And so the previous chapters, we talked about identifying what our target was so that we knew who we were going after, what the market was that we were going after. And in previous discussions, we were talking a lot about sphere of influence, repeat referrals, kind of building that pipeline so that once we come out of this shift, business is already in our pipeline waiting for us to service it. As well as there are small business owners, there are downsizers, maybe some people who've already left the state and they're at a point where they're like, you know what, just sell the house. So there definitely are people that need to sell their homes. And then on the buying, you have people, one of our own, Eric Monikov, just had a baby over the weekend.
Hmm.
So people are having babies, people are getting married, and so you're still going to have that need for buyers to need to buy.
Absolutely.
And so this is definitely a time that is going to stretch us to just even know what is that level of running that race. Like, where is the finish line right now? Right now, it's very unknown. So this is one of those times that Gary speaks about in his one thing of the unbalance. And you're never living a balanced life, you're living a counterbalanced life. And so this may be one of the times that we're a little really too far on one side, knowing that we'll be pulled back eventually.
For sure. And I think I think the next thing that I wanted to identify in here, because I think there's a lot of sometimes confusion around this topic, is how do you define a lead, or what exactly is a lead? And I think that Gary says
Mhm.
it very well on page 85, where he says you can't say you have a lead until you've talked with them and set an appointment. So just having a
Mhm.
conversation with someone may make you feel like, hey, I'm lead generating. Yet if you're not
Yep.
actually capturing the information, and if you're not actually going for the appointment, then you don't really have a lead.
So I agree. And so that's where, as far as the first part of his message in this about capturing the leads,
Yep.
we talked about this before the virus put us in a quarantine situation. We've been talking about how it is easier nowadays to actually cultivate leads
Mhm.
through the technology platforms that we have. It's just a bit easier to get the attraction. Now we're in this state where everybody's home. So do we have their attention? Yes, we have an audience we have their attention if we seek it.
Yep.
As far as the social media platforms, we can create our own leads.
Mhm.
When we were able to show homes and do open houses, we were also attracting buyers through marketing our inventory. So the part of capturing a lead and getting their information is not as challenging as it's been in previous years, or even in the market that I learned. I
Yep.
came into the market in 2004. So what I would like to focus our conversation on is the second part of this model, which is the connect part.
Yep.
And the connect part, Gary made a comment I thought was so, I don't know, eye-opening. He said connecting, it's in the tone.
Mhm.
It's in the tone. It is how you handle yourself.
Yep.
It's going to be little nuances. It's going to be your fluctuations of your voice, follow-up questions that you ask, true care and candor that you have with people that you may have just met, or people that are in your world that maybe you haven't connected with them on a real estate level yet. And so it's going to be all in the tone and in how you're leading yourself through it. And the real thing is for them to begin to believe that you are the solution, that
Mhm.
the customer has to believe that you're the one that's going to help them through a real estate need, right? So it's your job to influence them to choose you. And that's where connecting. Gary Keller also said something that what we do is all service, right? Could we agree that real estate, we believe we're in a service industry?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
right. So service in our industry, in a busy market, in a hustle and bustle, in the spring market is sprung, a lot of driving around, showing buyers houses, maybe putting a sign in the yard, going to run to an open house or an inspection. And so in the previous temperature, service to us has to do with acts as well. Now take the service, take the running around and showing houses out of our business. Our business now becomes communication.
Yep.
And so if we do not understand that in this time, our acts of communication can be sharpened like no other and needs to be in order for us to thrive out of this. If you don't believe that, then you'll be, mistaken, and we're not going to like where we're at in a couple of months. But if you hone in on this skill and understand that communication is going to be everything to
Yes,
connect with
and
people.
I would also say with that, like the tools that you have now in the KW Command platform allows you to do the capturing part very simply. So that's why I agree with you. There's no reason to really dive deep into the capture part because, for example, tomorrow on my Tech Tuesday, I'll be doing a video that I'll post to Facebook on how to add a contact, connect them to the neighborhood URLs, and share them with your clients. So, the capturing part,
Perfect.
make sure you capture name, email address, and physical address. Easy enough. The one thing I just wanted to highlight before I agree with you, let's move on to connecting and
Hmm.
some of those dialogues, is just on page 88. I think this was very powerful to me that I just want to share. It says, the National Association of Realtors researched over the years has consistently communicated that the real competition is in real estate is getting to the table, not at it. The revealing statistics show that approximately 2/3 of all buyers and sellers only interview one agent, and approximately half of the remainder only interview two. So I can't stress enough that what we're going over when we get to the connecting and the closing portion, you just need to get in the door and you just need to get to the table, because ultimately most people, as this is finding, more, approximately 2/3 are only interviewing one person and the other half's only interviewing two. So we're not talking about a line at the door of agents interviewing for the listing. We're talking about 1 to 2 people. So it just, especially in a shifting market, it just, the emphasis has to be more on the lead conversion aspect of things and actually getting into the appointment. That's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And the numbers, get their numbers and their info, but get an appointment. Getting an appointment, today's world, what does that look like? It looks like one of these. It looks like a Zoom. It looks like a FaceTime. It looks like a conference call. And so that is an appointment. If you are presenting an opportunity for them to transact with you, it's an appointment, right?
And I think then,
So,
as we shift to the connecting piece on page 94, one of the things that I really liked is Gary wrote, the fundamental philosophy of connecting is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I think that's
yeah.
critical, to not look at somebody as an appointment or to look at somebody as money, as dollar signs. Look at them as you have to genuinely care for the outcome.
Sure. And, you have to practice. So in the connecting, it's going to be through great, great, great questions, right? Questioning in the capture, questioning in the connect, questioning in the closing phase. Always asking great questions, leading a horse to water. You can't make them drink. And from Diana Kokoska, you can give them salt lick.
Yep.
Okay? So you can give a horse salt lick to get them thirsty enough that they want to drink, and then also lead them. And so that's what we need to look at with our potential buyers, sellers, agents, is, are we asking enough questions that they're self-discovering to make a decision? In this time, we realize the value that we have in aiding people to make great decisions. And Gary speaks a lot about that in this chapter, is that if you continue to, over time, you're going to get really good at leading people to make great decisions. If you just wake up and try to practice it once on a line. He said people don't practice on real people. They practice, medical students practice on cadavers.
Yep.
Why do we as real estate professionals go out and practice our scripts on the first seller and buyer that we can get in front of? Great athletes practice. They don't just go out on the court. They don't go out into the field. They practice.
Yep.
And then they have preseason, and then they're ready. So it's the same kind of muscle memory that you need for your word choice and your tonality to connect, as we would look at an athlete preparing their muscles to go play.
Yeah, and Gary did talk about in there how he used to have, I forget what the guy's name was, but he would come in at like 8 o'clock every morning and practice with him, because then by the time they actually got to the actual calls, he was like, he knew all the objections and all the things that were coming at him.
50 times. He says you're going to practice a script 50 times. Lock yourself in a room with a partner in the morning before you get on your calls. In today's world, it could be on a Zoom call before you get on your calls. 50 times go through an objective and keep going back and forth, because at that 50th time, you're gonna know how to handle any which way that client would throw that objection at you.
Exactly.
You're gonna be confident and convicted that that's the right thing to say.
I think so. Two things, and you touched on this, but it's important to just reiterate. Connecting doesn't mean small talk. It's not saying, hey, do you like to play golf? Do you like to play tennis? It's actually asking questions that we're going to say in a minute. The other piece of it, too, that I think is equally, if not more important, is that you have to, and I know this is hard for a lot of people, but you have to be really good listeners. A lot of times people want to talk, but they're not actually listening to what people are saying or giving the opportunity for the client to talk. So I think,
Mhm.
as Gary writes in here, to make sure that, you know, he says you will ask and then listen and listen, and then you'll ask again, you'll listen and listen. So every time you talk, make sure you're listening, listening, and listening. So that's important to just remember that as you're speaking with people, that this isn't your show where you're talking for 90%. You should really be listening a lot more than talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to
So,
questions?
what?
Do you want to read some of the questions, the 6 connection questions on the bottom of page 95?
Well, yeah. So the 6 connection questions are on page 95, and then if you look at 96 and 97, for those that you are following with the book, you also have real life examples of how to use these questions, not just asking the who are they, right? So the first question, it says, who are they?
Mhm.
Matt, tell me a little bit about yourself. Hey, could you back up a little bit and share with me, how did you get to come to New Jersey?
Yep.
Hey, share with me, so that's the first one, is who are they? Tell me about your kids, tell me about your work, tell me, so that's a real easy way that we should all be able to hone in that skill of asking somebody who they are and just getting to know them a little bit.
Yeah. And then,
So the second
yeah,
one.
the second question is what do they want, or what do they need to do? So, after you talk to them, you say, thanks for sharing that. Now, if you would, please tell me what you want to do. Or two folks called about Brandera Drive. Are you looking for a new home? So this is where you're getting to begin to assess what they want and what they need. Do they need to move out and then buy a new house? Or are they just looking to buy? So it's really getting information on the
Yeah.
client.
I mean, when you're asking those kind of questions, you want to ask, does the job bring you closer here? Does schools, what is your big motivator? I mean, those are all kinds of spin-off questions that can come from that. 3 is, where do they want or need to do it? So when we have buyers, and especially when we have buyers or sellers that are buyers, you want to try to figure out what is their end, what's their goal.
Mhm.
Are they moving because they need a bigger house? Are they moving because they need a smaller house? Are they moving because they want to be closer to the grandkids? Are they retiring and they'd like to travel, so they don't want much upkeep to a house? One of the questions that we've all been armed with is, what about that's important to you, Matt? Oh, I see that you want a big backyard. What about that's important to you? I see that you want to move to Morris County. What about that's important to you? And we cannot have put our assumptions. We need to ask questions, and then, like you said, have an active listening ear. So the fourth question is,
Oh, sorry.
why? Good. Yeah,
Yeah,
you got it.
why do they want or need to do it?
Yeah. So what are some of those kind of?
Um, can you share with me why you're doing this? Why you're needing to move? What will this move mean to you? So that's really, you're trying to determine it, as you're saying, and to emphasize what you just said, the motivation. Like you're kind of qualifying them in a way and trying to figure out, okay, are these people, like, are they really looking to move, or is this just something that they're stringing you along? Like you're really trying to listen and hear what their motivation
Mhm.
is, what their timeline is as well, because that's a big factor in it as well, as to how soon they need to be out of their house, maybe how soon they need to be in a new one. Those are all good information that you can get from these questions.
Yeah. And sometimes what I've found is sellers and buyers may have a misconception on how long a process needs to take, or should take, or can take. So you do need to spell it out to the sellers that they could prolong it, they can make it shorter, all different options. The fifth question, a connecting question, is, when do they want or need to do it? And that kind of speaks to a little bit of what I just said, is getting a feel for their timetable, understanding, in an ideal world, Mr. Buyer, Mr. Seller, when would you like to see this close? And share with me, what's important about that to you. Real simple. And the last question, Matt?
And the last question is, how do they plan to do it? So, um, something along the lines of, please share with me what you've already done to plan for this, or how do you plan to do this? So you're assessing what they've already done, what their expectations are, and maybe if they've already experienced this before.
Yeah. So once again, do not put your assumptions, out there, and let's listen to them, and let's hear through the words that they're using. Have they spoken to another agent? Have they seen other homes? Have they done this before? Have they, sometimes I've also experienced those serial buyers that every couple of years they think they're going to move, but then they try to put the house on the market and then they decide that they're not doing it. Have they done this before? If they have, what got in the way? What was their fear that blocked them from moving forward last time? So these are really great opportunities to become a true consultant.
Yeah, and I think, one of the look at these questions, and Gary did mention this in the book, they can sometimes feel repetitive, sometimes they can feel very similar, yet that's how they're supposed to feel. Like, they're going to be a little stilted, they're going to be a little repetitive, but you're getting all the information that you need to get, and you're confirming some of their answers through asking the follow-up questions. So I think it's just important, as you do this over and over, it may feel repetitive, yet you just have to
Yeah.
stick to the script because they're tried and true, they work.
Yeah. So I know that your intent was to maybe break this up into 2 sections. We could actually stop here and spend a little more time in the connecting, to then tomorrow move into the closes and really go through each close and use them so people can see them in action.
Yeah. No,
And if we would go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, we can definitely do that. I think if you want to cover some more of these connecting questions and go more in detail, we definitely can.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. So I just want to go back to encouraging everyone to role play this a little bit. Maybe we're home, maybe ask your spouse, roommate, hey, could you just play the part of a potential seller or buyer and see how that sounds? So, and see how you would like to be connected with.
Yep.
You go into a store, you don't want to be followed around, you don't want to be hounded, you don't want to, maybe it's not the questions that are asked, but maybe it's also leading with some value and then following up with a question. So even if it's a sign call or somebody's calling on a listing that you're still advertising, it might look like, hey, I'm wondering what the taxes are on that property.
Yep.
And you're answering them saying, okay, I see that you're calling on 123 Main Street. The taxes on that are $15,000, and it is a 3/4 acre. The price on that's $569. Is that something that was in your price range? Are you looking specifically in Passaic County, specifically in Wayne? And now you start probing and you start asking questions, and you start using those connecting questions to get you cultivating and potentially to connect to make an appointment.
Yeah, and I think you say this a lot to me, come from curiosity. And I think
Yes.
that that's ultimately what you're doing when you're connecting is you're simply coming from curiosity because client A is going to be different from client B, who's going to be different from client C. So there's not going to be a one size fit all for any of them. So I think
No.
every situation you have to come from curiosity and you have to become aware of people's worries, their concerns, and to your point, why something's important to them. You're not you're not selling someone at this point in the connecting phase. You're really investigating. You're really doing your
Right.
best detective work to say, okay, why is this important to someone? Again, you're coming from curiosity. You're asking the right questions, and you're listening. I can't stress that enough. If you're coming from curiosity, if you're listening, you're essentially a detective investigating for that information to be able to best serve your client's needs as you get into that next phase.
And to that point, when you see investigations, because I know I'm always watching like Cold Case or 48
Yeah.
Hours,
Law and Order.
to reiterate, Matt, what I'm hearing you say is,
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I think what I just heard you tell me is that you'd like to be in by this time. Is that right? And you're like, no, 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 no. I did not mean that. I would love to be. However, I don't need to be there until 2 months from then.
Yep.
So reiterating what you've heard them say
Mm-hmm.
is really important as a tactic to making sure that you're connecting and that we're speaking the same language, right?
Yes, and I forget what chapter it was in. Maybe it's in this chapter later when we get to the close. But they talk about people's natural reactions to things are usually either yes or no. And there's
Yeah.
yet a no is a no is a no, and a yes is a no is a yes. And I think that relates to this section in the connecting, and that to what you're saying is reaffirm what people are saying and repeat what they're saying, because
Yes.
you just want to make sure that you're hearing it correctly. And then when they validate it, they're also going to be more likely to be on board with what you're saying, because they're hearing, okay, she's listening to me because she just repeated what I just said. Okay, she's listening and she's hearing what I'm saying, and it builds kind of a different level of trust and a different layer there that maybe wouldn't be if you didn't repeat.
Well, that's a good word. I think trust is built there, and you kind of earn the right to now influence them. There's some validity brought in because you are actively listening to me. I know that you care, so now I care what you know, like you said before. 101 is what you were talking about, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah. So the top of 101, it's called the decision continuum, and it goes from the absolute no
yeah.
to the absolute yes, with on the fence in the middle.
Yep.
And we are always, as professionals, as real estate consultants, we are always trying to take people to a yes. People are not going to say yes. You are not going to accidentally convince them to do something that they haven't wanted to do.
Correct.
I can assure you nobody is evil-minded in saying you're going to twist somebody into doing something that they did not raise their hands for. They want to sell a house, they want to buy a house. You're there to help them.
Yep.
So I promise you this would be a great time to break out that DISC, the disc,
Yep.
or whatever you use, the Myers-Briggs, the if you're using the KPA, the disc, the DISC, there's a lot of information out there that even if you're not with Keller Williams, you can kind of do the research on. And to identify that buyer or seller, are they a D behavior, an I, an S, or a C, will also dictate how you should be connecting with them. And then to tomorrow's conversation, how you should be closing with them.
Yeah, I think that's,
so,
we'll cover more tomorrow on how the disc can affect the conversations you're having and how you get to the closing section.
yes.
So with that, I think we covered a lot today. So we covered the first half of section 5, shift tactic 5. So tomorrow we'll cover pages 98 to page 108, which really finishes chapter 5, which is really all about closing, and the different steps, the different types.
And Matt, I mean, that's pretty, we've gone through about 100 pages of the book so far. It's really impressive, and I hope everybody's been following along. Once again, they can go to kellerinc.com to see some of the resources and tools, and also to buy the audio as well as the leadership edition and the regular book. So just wanted to put a plug in there for where people can find future or other resources.
Absolutely. So, and Allison did just post on last week the PDF version of Shift. So there's a couple different places where you can access it.
Awesome.
Awesome. So then we will finish up Shift Tactic 5 tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.